Breaking point. Is NATO facing its biggest crisis yet? The geopolitical landscape is shifting rapidly, and a new chapter in the ongoing conflict in Eastern Europe is unfolding. Reports indicate that a significant number of soldiers have been captured in the city of Kurs, raising critical questions about their identities. Are they truly Ukrainian forces, or could they include NATO personnel and even American soldiers? This development could have far-reaching consequences, potentially triggering one of the biggest political crises in modern Western history. But that's just the beginning. From declining military aid to Ukraine to secret negotiations at the highest levels, the situation is becoming increasingly volatile. Stay with us as we break down the 10 key factors shaping the conflict and what they mean for the future of global stability. The city of Kurs has become the focal point of a dramatic turning point in the war. Russian forces have reportedly encircled the area, trapping a substantial number of Ukrainian troops. However, intelligence sources suggest that among those captured could be NATO-aligned forces, including American operatives. If proven true, this revelation would confirm what many have speculated: direct Western involvement on the battlefield, something that NATO leadership has consistently denied. The possibility that Moscow could present undeniable proof of this could send shockwaves through Western capitals, forcing governments to face difficult questions about their role in the war and the potential consequences of escalation. The stakes have never been higher, and the next moves by global leaders could determine the future course of the conflict. As this situation unfolds, former U.S. President Donald Trump has reportedly expressed deep concern over the potential release of images or videos showing captured NATO personnel. According to sources close to his campaign, Trump fears that such footage could devastate public perception in the United States and Europe, exposing the extent of NATO's engagement in Ukraine. If American or European troops appear in Russian custody, it would challenge the long-standing official narrative that only Ukrainian forces are actively fighting on the ground. The political fallout could be massive, especially as Trump positions himself for another presidential run, advocating for a shift in U.S. foreign policy. Could this lead to a recalibration of America's stance on Ukraine? Meanwhile, the United States has noticeably scaled back its military support to Ukraine. Supplies of advanced weaponry and missile systems have slowed, indicating growing reluctance in Washington to continue extensive involvement in the conflict. This reduction in aid signals a significant shift in strategy, suggesting that U.S. policymakers may be reassessing the long-term viability of Ukrainian resistance. Could this be the beginning of a Western withdrawal from direct engagement in the conflict, or is it a temporary pause before another escalation? The Ukrainian military is facing increasing strain as its reserves are depleted and new recruits struggle to keep up with battlefield demands. Reports from within Ukraine indicate a desperate situation, with many units stretched thin and suffering from critical shortages of equipment and ammunition. In contrast, Russian forces appear to be gaining strength, benefiting from a steady supply of new weaponry and reinforcements. The balance of power is shifting, and unless a dramatic change occurs, Ukraine's ability to sustain prolonged resistance could be in jeopardy. Could this mark a turning point in the war, where Ukraine's defenses begin to collapse under mounting pressure? One of the biggest challenges for the West is the inability to produce weapons at the pace required to sustain Ukraine's defense efforts. Military analysts have noted that Western arms manufacturers are struggling to keep up with demand, facing production bottlenecks and resource shortages. Meanwhile, Russia has ramped up its industrial output, continuously modernizing its military infrastructure. If this trend continues, Ukraine could find itself increasingly outgunned, with diminishing prospects for military success. Is the West prepared for the long-term economic and logistical strain of sustaining this conflict? The potential exposure of captured NATO personnel could trigger a crisis within the alliance itself. If images or testimonies emerge confirming that Western soldiers were actively engaged in combat, it could spark internal divisions among NATO member states. Some governments might push for deeper involvement, while others may seek to distance themselves from the conflict to avoid political backlash. The credibility of NATO leadership could be severely undermined, and public trust in Western governments could take a significant hit. Will this force NATO to rethink its strategy, or could it lead to fractures within the alliance itself? Behind the scenes, speculation is growing about secret negotiations between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. Some sources suggest that Trump, anticipating a potential return to the White House, is already exploring diplomatic channels to de-escalate tensions. These alleged discussions could focus on securing the release of captured Western personnel without triggering a major political scandal. If true, this would indicate a strategic pivot in U.S. foreign policy, with Trump aiming to establish a new framework for U.S.-Russia relations. Could these talks lay the groundwork for a future peace settlement, or are they merely an attempt to contain the current crisis? The impact of captured NATO soldiers extends beyond diplomacy. It could reshape public perception of the conflict. If Western media is forced to acknowledge the direct involvement of NATO troops, it would challenge the dominant narrative presented over the past 2 years. Video testimonies or first-hand accounts from captured personnel could shift public opinion, potentially leading to protests or demands for policy changes in the US and Europe. How will mainstream media navigate this development? And will governments attempt to control the flow of information to avoid destabilization? Another pressing issue is the legal status of captured foreign fighters. Under international law, regular soldiers enjoy protections under the Geneva Conventions, but mercenaries and unofficial combatants do not. If Russia classifies NATO personnel as mercenaries, they could face prosecution under Russian law rather than be treated as prisoners of war. This raises ethical and legal questions about the nature of modern warfare and the use of private military contractors. Will this case set a precedent for how international conflicts are conducted in the future? Historically, conflicts in Eastern Europe have often followed similar patterns, with invading forces facing enormous challenges once inside Russian territory. From Napoleon's ill-fated campaign to the brutal winter battles of World War II, history has shown that entering Russia is far easier than leaving. The situation in Kurs mirrors these historical lessons, serving as a stark reminder of the risks faced by any force attempting to challenge Russia on its own soil. Could this be another chapter in a long list of failed incursions into Russian-controlled territories? The unfolding events in Kurs could be a turning point in the ongoing conflict. If NATO personnel are confirmed among the captured soldiers, the implications could be seismic. Political leaders will be forced to respond, potentially reshaping alliances and strategies in real time. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian military faces mounting pressures, struggling to hold its positions as Russian forces maintain their momentum. The decline in Western military aid raises questions about the sustainability of Ukraine's resistance, and concerns about production capabilities further complicate the West's ability to maintain its commitments. The possibility of secret negotiations between Trump and Putin introduces another layer of intrigue, suggesting that behind closed doors, world leaders are already considering exit strategies. However, the biggest question remains, how will NATO react if undeniable proof emerges that its forces have been directly engaged on the ground? The outcome of this crisis could shape global politics for years to come. If you found this analysis insightful, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay updated on the latest geopolitical developments. What do you think will happen next? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We want to hear from you. Stay tuned for more in-depth reports on the evolving global landscape.